film. Tried to get into the lecture series last year. Couldn't afford it. It was too expensive. Now he's on TED. All right, so let's get through the rest of this. So this idea, right? So with behavior, it's this. We design these, we're making assumptions about this, but we know they're related, and we know they transform each other. And there's evidence that altering the environment can alter behavior. Most of the research that you'll see and that we're talking about is observational, ability to perceive it from the outside. But it's becoming predictive, and we'll finish with a predictive one, which is to say, you don't have to talk to anybody, and you're probably about 70% accurate in terms of determining what's happening in a place, just looking at the physical place, without talking or interacting with anybody. So we'll start with more observational stuff, we'll go to the predictive realm. And just to put a point on some things that Ron was talking about, it's not just for luxury and leisure, although beauty we know is sort of that opening, that entree for people to accept things they don't understand. But this way of thinking is being applied to issues of safety and security, physical activity and nutrition, attention deficit disorder, which is a huge situation, Alzheimer's, and building social capital was actually a study that a friend of mine, Bill Sullivan, did about landscaping. To bring it home to one thing that's more economically driven, this was Fayetteville Street in 1920. So this is looking north to the Capitol building. We're on Fayetteville, and in the 1950s, you know, growing concern, but also in the 1950s is when Raleigh had a big suburban boom. So we start building in areas, new areas, actually where our campus is, and further out. New development, which took life out of the city center. At that time, it was popular in landscape architecture and in design to transform or to propose transforming city centers into dense places with pedestrian malls and street systems. So Charlottesville, if you've been to Virginia and University of Virginia's campus, still has the Charlottesville Mall, Street Mall, which actually functions still functions pretty well. State Street, Transit Mall in Madison, Wisconsin, you can see this pattern of college towns, so to speak. And the one that is probably the most celebrated, Boulder, Boulder downtown street mall there, which makes Boulder among the top 10 most livable places in the country, even though it's tiny, for years and years and years. So in this trend, Raleigh did the same thing. So actually the founder of our department did the design for the Fayetteville Street Mall. So for 4 blocks south from the Capitol to what was then the convention center, no cars, right? So fountains, plazas, everything. Now, this whole thing died, right? Shops closed. Even when I moved here, you know, when I started living down here, there was nobody down here. We were sitting on the steps of the Capitol on that Sunday morning when they started the demolition of the convention center, which used to be on the other end. And then started to rework this. Now, the reworking of these places, because they thought that the form was encouraging a certain kind of behavior that was not in line with the physical vitality of the place. They're borrowing from precedents in other places, big scale. They're borrowing from stuff like this, right? So you know this guy. So direct observation, if you went out there on that Fayetteville Street Mall, no one was gathering, no one was moving. They borrowed from her, Claire Cooper Marcus, who we don't know as much about because we're on the East Coast. If we're on the West Coast, or any way tied to Berkeley, she's held in the same regard as William White. Maybe more so because her research really informed the transformation of spaces in San Francisco. And so if you wanted to measure the high bar of public space in our country, San Francisco is one of them. So through years and years and years of work, People Places is sort of one of the really important manuals for figuring that out. So they did all the research and they figured that out. They said, look, we need to make more spaces for people. We need to design these. Which brings us to the big point. Is we like to think as designers we left an archive of built places that we can draw on for inspiration, right? That we can apply to other situations. So I'm from Detroit, Michigan. So if someone asks me what a great street is, my first moment of recall is whatever a great street was at home. I start comparing that to the street that I had. I start to think about the behaviors and the patterns and the palettes of those. I modify them, but there's this recall in my brain. I'm anticipating the behavior that's going to happen because I've experienced it in a place like that before. And that's the bulk of our work. So observation, descriptions, surveys, complex descriptions, which Demi calls case studies. So the ability to get in depth to figure out these factors. So in that regard, these are pages from Alan Jacobs' book, Great Streets, one of the great urban design books out there. Highly recommend it. All sketches, starting kind of serendipitously. He picked his favorite places to sit. Not like the assignment y'all have when y'all started your graduate career. He decided to figure out what made them work. So he looked at them high level and did sketches. He started to cut sections to show drawings from the dimensions of the space. He started to think about what was happening above, what was happening below. This is what happened to William White's work after William White passed away and Project for Public Spaces was born. Fred Kent's group, which is a direct descendant, which kind of created the types of people places, encoding and expanding upon William White's initial discoveries. So placemaking in the middle, and Fred Kent actually would be a great person to Google. Some of his debates and discussions are very volatile, controversial. He's a rabble rouser kind of person. But you can see all these different factors that they pay attention to. Well, it turns out that they were retained to rethink Fayetteville Street and Fayetteville Street Mall and City Plaza. So that's the original drawing they proposed through community workshops, downtown community workshops for City Plaza that you all enjoy today, which led to the $15 million to rip out the pedestrian plaza and return it to a street which was highly controversial at the state legislature level. What do you mean you're spending that much money to turn it back into a street? Now, here's the problem with it. It anticipated behavior, but they were trying to make a situation for market behavior, not people behavior. Meaning an environment where people thought that customers and consumers would come and buy and spend. So people want to eat at restaurants, people want to dine at bars, people who want to enjoy nightlife, which city centers are entitled to, but those are the behaviors. Issues like homelessness, issues like affordable housing, issues like transportation, issues like basic services, like where you're going to get your food, borrowed from Ron Finley. Those elements, they're hoping come later. So this is a way of thinking about that behavioral model in the context of big city stuff, in a place where people didn't see any value for a long period of time. How do you kickstart it? What behaviors do you want to happen out there in order to generate interest and energy? So festivals, attractions, entertainment, a lot of things that in cities that are functioning pretty well, you don't need any of that stuff. With the hope of creating enough incentive to eventually add the elements that make it a real city. Okay. So right now, still, nobody knows down here in any great numbers. You can't get your daily needs met. And if you don't have a middle-class job or higher income, you can't enjoy any of the amenities. But it's a model, right? In terms of keying in on certain groups of people and identifying their behavioral patterns and then designing them to suit. This is the same group of people that enjoy things like South Point Mall, Streets of South Point, near where I live. Same people who enjoy American Tobacco campus, near where I live in Durham as well. These destination-oriented places that are about retail and show and entertainment with the hopes of building generative city systems. There is a legacy that's tied to that has important credibility. Including this guy. I mentioned Donald Appleyard when we talked about perception research before, and some of his important work with Randy Hester with neighborhood space. Well, Livable Streets is his other major discovery, and it dealt a lot with behavioral research.
started the first evidence-based research of the problem of traffic on neighborhood streets. It provided the foundational arguments for traffic calming